Listo.
So we're
Hi there.
Hi. Exactamente.
Juan's preparing.
Oh, good.
La presentación va a ser en español.
En español.
Pues por supuesto, si necesitas, si quieres.
Sorry, like a good Colombian, I'm always late.
I like that.
It's fashionably late.
Like a good brewmaster, you have that tension.
There you go.
Fashionably late, but then intensively craft and process oriented.
It's the details that matter.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Thank you, Juan, for doing this. I'm just waiting to see people logging back on, just so we can mobilize the conversation again.
This is great. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
And I have to say, Dr. Montoya, that with technology, it's amazing how you can see the 3D, global ties, Juan. So we're not close to him, actually. This is
It's a hologram that we have here at the brew now.
It's a virtual juxtaposition. That's fantastic.
I invested in this technology because of COVID. So
Very nice. Yeah. Next step is to be able to actually drink the coffee when you get digitally transported.
I am working on that technology too.
I like that. So Juan, I have to admit, I've never pronounced your last name before, but it's Certain, correct?
Certain. So it's French and it's Certain, but it's Certain.
Certain. Nice. Okay. Very good. That's a good learning moment for me.
There you go.
I've always seen it in print, and then I've never had a chance to just utter it. So thank you.
Yeah, well, at least you didn't I get the joke every day. Not every day anymore, but quite often. Are you certain? When I tell them my last name. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've never heard that one before. Thank you.
Right. At least your first name isn't Sergio.
Oh my God.
That would just be cruel.
That would be bad.
Yes. Okay. As people start to get back on, I invite everybody to interject comments by chat, and this is going to be a conversation. Spoken to Juan before and Global Ties about how this is going to go, and they're very, very much receptive to this being a conversation that moves throughout the hour. So I just want to take this opportunity to introduce Juan Certain, and as one of the entrepreneurs in Albuquerque whom I admire greatly, and who is really a representation of this this movement now. Juan, would you refer to yourself as third wave coffee? Is that a thing that you embrace? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that in the conversation, this kind of wave toward craft production in the global economy. But I do want to mention something that transitions the last session to this session. And that is, when I was in Morocco last, one of the greatest examples of international management that I had happened in a very intimate exchange that I had with a local leather salesperson. He actually had a kiosk in the main area of Marrakesh, and he was selling leather bags. In fact, this leather bag right here, and the thing that really struck me is that when we started to talk, I was in a hurry and I wanted to purchase the product and just get out, and I needed to get to a meeting. And he said, if you would not mind hurrying, if you would not mind taking a moment, I think then we will actually have a very good deal. And what he did was he actually introduced me to his niece and his wife, and they invited me up to a tea room that was just above the area. And I actually canceled my meeting, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. We actually spoke for about 5 hours. He invited me in, he showed me his home, he talked about his family. And actually he's a very good salesman, because I ended up buying more than the bag. I spent like 6 times more than I probably would have. But in the end, I felt like every penny was worth it, because in the haggling process, and this is something I'll post in a video later on about the haggling process. I learned that the haggling was not just about negotiating a good price. It was in the negotiation that you actually built the relationship. And this drives home what Chris was saying about relationships, is that in the Middle East and North Africa, the idea of having the conversation, haggling over the price, is part of the product. You're actually buying into the conversation, and you're not just leaving with a product, you're leaving with a relationship that you had, even if it was just for a very short period of time. And this corresponds now with a very real global trend around the world, is that people want the intangibility of the experience to be embedded in the products that they buy. And this is something that is very much at the heart of the logic of what New Mexico represents. And so I am very pleased and honored to introduce Juan in that context, because Juan very much values that. And he's going to share with you now his journey as an entrepreneur and how his production matters within New Mexico and why he thinks that matters. Thank you very much, Juan. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the invitation, and I appreciate talking to you guys. Just a quick parenthesis on what you just said. It's always been such a key component to my business model. When I decided to go into coffee, well, I was kind of born into coffee, but we'll go into it when we go through the walkthrough of my life. But if I was going to go into coffee, for me, good coffee was a given. Like, I had to have a good product in order to sell it. But my whole model is about the social connotation of coffee. The fact that we can sit and talk around a cup of coffee. So especially the brew, you'll find people who put their earphones and they just want to work. But you'll find the brew, like my model, is all about being able to sit around a cup of coffee and have a conversation. And I find like that is really the key to a lot of my success, is the fact that I've been able to build amazing relationships. And I completely agree with you, Dr. Montoya, with it's a different way of seeing things, because it's, even though we're all here to do business, it's a different way of getting there, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So please share with us a little bit about your journey.
Anyway, yeah, before I start, I do want to say I would love to do this more of a conversation. So as I start to talk, I would love to hear from, if you guys have questions or if you guys want to say something. I just love to have more of an interactive thing than just starting to talk and having a speech where everyone's just falling asleep, because I've been in those and I don't like those. So anyway, just part of even this social thing, I've been missing having interactions with people. So please interrupt me anytime, and please ask questions, or if you guys have comments, I would love to hear them. I'm here with Judy and Destiny, so they'll help me if there's a question, or if there's someone wanting to say something. Definitely stop. But anyway, my name is Juan, and I was born in Colombia many 20 years ago. I'm gonna go with that. I moved here because of the status of the country at the time, the civil war at the time, the drug issue with Colombia at the time. But before moving here, I had the great destiny to be born into a coffee family. So my grandfather built a farm back in 1960, a coffee farm in a region of Colombia that is not normally a coffee producing region, or it wasn't. Now it is, but it wasn't. He was one of the pioneers who thought, this is a great region. Why don't we just build a farm? And he started his business venture just with an idea of introducing coffee into a new region of the country, which is the Southwest. So if you guys are not familiar with Colombia, Colombia is a mountainous region. We have three main mountains, which is the Andes that split into three when it comes north. So coffee grows in the coffee belt. The coffee belt is very close to the equator. And basically the reason for that is coffee is very temperamental, and coffee does not like quick changes in temperature. But not only that, coffee does not like heat either. So we need mountain regions in order for coffee to grow. So coffee belt is going to be around the equator, and we need mountains around the equator for coffee to grow. And that's kind of the nutshell on coffee. He decided, he had land. It was in the mountain. It was 5,515 feet above sea level. And he decided he was going to start growing coffee in the southwest of Colombia instead of the center of the country. At 1964, he loses his daughter Miriam. And in honor of her passing, he decided to name the whole thing after her. And that's how Villa Miriam came to be. And that's the name of the original company I started back in 2009. So going back, this is 1999. We're going through the middle of a civil war in Colombia. Drug cartels are being brought down. The false economy in the country is collapsing. Not only do we have increased crime because people are struggling, you know, to eat, basically. And they're going after anyone who has land or some sort of resources by kidnapping their kids, which is what happened to my family. And then we basically were there one day, the next day we came here. And we got here as refugees. So interesting enough, this dynamic going on right now, I'm like everything. I'm a refugee who came here, who was accepted into this country, and was able to start something new because of the opportunities given by the US. Decided to come to Miami because my parents didn't speak the language. A lot of Spanish in Miami, so that's where we landed. You know, from the beginning, it was all the jobs that you don't think you're gonna do. Like me growing up, I didn't think I was gonna be parking cars in the evenings till 4 a.m. at a club, which was my first job when I was able to work in the US. And from there, I realized Miami wasn't for me. I didn't see the opportunity. Decided to move to New Mexico. And that was purely based on convenience. So I had an aunt who lived in Rio Rancho, and she was the one who could take me in and feed me while I found a job and found an apartment and, you know, had enough money to be able to do something. And that was the reason why I landed in New Mexico. It really wasn't anything other than that. At the beginning, I did not like Albuquerque. It wasn't for me. It took me a good 2 years for me to get used to the pace. I feel like Albuquerque has its own vibe, its own energy. Here I started working at a call center, you know, as a bilingual rep. I made $14 an hour, I believe, back then, which coming from Miami, parking vehicles and not having a steady income was actually pretty impressive. And Albuquerque was, especially Rio Rancho, was kind of inexpensive. So I was able to get an apartment fairly quick, you know, get into a car. The American dream was somehow happening fairly quick. So my family saw it. 3 months later, my younger brother joined me. 6 months later, my parents were here. And then a couple of years later, my older brother was here. Just because they saw we had more opportunity here in New Mexico than we did in Florida. From there, I went to work for the Department of Education. I found a job as a temp. So call center life for me was not the right fit. Started looking, my background is in finance and system processing. Like I studied industrial design. I have a bachelor's in industrial design. I did start with accounting, so I have a minor's in accounting. So I wanted to go more towards that. So I applied for a temp job with the Department of Education. And through it, I was able to, through the career tech department, I was able to balance their budget in like 3 months, and they offered me a job. And that was like the path to government, the government career that I started with them. Quickly, I became the director for the RECs, which are the regional education cooperatives. I was the financial coordinator for them. And these are entities for these rural areas that don't have enough child count to apply for bigger federal grants. So they do a cooperative, and within the region, they have the child count that they can apply for Title I, Title III, all these funds with bigger pool of counts. So I was the coordinator for that, the director for that for the state. And from there, I went to be the deputy bureau chief for the flow through, handling about $3.2 billion on federal and state grants for the 89 districts and 192 charters. This was 10 years ago, so I'm not sure how many districts or charters we have now, and 9 RECs. Through it, my family has always been very political. My grandfather was a governor. So I thought I wanted to be a politician. That's really, in a nutshell, why I decided that path was a good one for me. But the more I rised on the ladder of government, the more I realized that you had to play a game that I didn't want to play, which is favors or signing stuff without asking questions. That was my experience. I'm not saying all of it is like that, but that was my experience. And that's when I decided I had to do something. If I wanted to affect change, even at a very small level, I had to do something that I could control. And that was my big push to, I need to start something of my own. Basically, that was the trigger of if I want to do better conditions for workers, if I want to really do at a very microcosm scale, I had to start my own thing. And that was the initial thought of, I need to start a company. Like, I just need to be an entrepreneur and take the leap and start something. So when I decided that was going to be the path, I was still working at the Department of Education. My brother and I decided, well, why not go to our roots? You know, try to do this international thing. It feels like there's such an opportunity when you look at the world, and we understand as the US as part of something much bigger, instead of thinking the US is the only resource we have. And being that I was born into coffee, it just kind of made sense. And full disclaimer, up to that point, I did not drink coffee. So it was quite the leap to go into coffee. Now, the reason why I didn't drink coffee though, it was because I never found good coffee here. Like, it was Starbucks, McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts. Back then, there wasn't many more options. And for me, it just tasted like burnt. It didn't make me feel good. So I just didn't drink coffee. So when I told my friends I was going to start a coffee company, that didn't connect. But I saw it as an opportunity to bring my story to it and be able to connect with people. Just like we were saying at the beginning, it was like a great way to connect with people and be able not only to sell a product, but to sell an experience and to sell part of my life, part of what I've grown up with, part of my history. Because I did grow up drinking coffee. Just when I moved here, I stopped drinking it altogether. So it was 6 months into the idea that we bought a roaster, and we decided we would roast at the South Valley Economic Development Center. We didn't have a lot of money. We didn't want to go build a big facility. This was a commercial kitchen you could rent by the hour. And it just made sense while we tested to see if this was going to take off, if there was a business for it. What we did realize though is there was not good coffee as far as the third wave, as far as specialty coffee. That term alone wasn't known in Albuquerque. And we realized there was a need for it, just as a personal experience. And the fact that I didn't drink coffee, that was a big tell. So we went to the South Valley Economic Development Center. They didn't have the capability of having a roaster in there, so we had to buy this portable roaster that was manufactured somewhere, I want to say Minnesota, and it was like the most MacGyver, I want to say, contraption that we had that was dangerous, but we had to make it work. It was just, and they would allow us to roast between midnight and 4 in the morning because there was so much smoke involved and everything would impregnate. So basically what happened was then I would go to work, which meant I would drive to Santa Fe at 6 in the morning, work till 4, drive home, kind of take a shower, have dinner, and then drive to the South Valley Economic Development Center. At 10 in the evening, get everything, get the roaster up, because we would have to take it in and out every evening. And so that we would be ready by 11:30-ish when nobody was there, start roasting. And we would just make, it was a 2-pound roaster. So we would make about a pound of coffee at a time. So spend 4 hours getting 10 pounds of coffee. So then we can go sell it. And that was the beginning of it, really. It was just, when I think of it, it was just such an experience to think of how crazy, and to be honest, I don't know if I would want to do it again right now. Having to drive to Santa Fe, do all this stuff, try to perform over there, and then come roast and then try to talk to I just felt like talking to my friends like, hey, I have a bag of coffee. Do you want to buy it? Like, this is what I have. Let's see, what
kept you going through the trials and
see that this I love. So please, if you guys have questions, just throw it my way, because so what kept me going through trial and tribulation was I really didn't see myself working for someone else, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like if you have it in you, you know it, that you're not going to be attached to, and I'm just going to say the system, and I don't know if that's true, but to a company, to a boss, to like, I wanted to have the flexibility of travel. I wanted to have the flexibility of hours. I wanted to feel like I was working towards something that was mine. Being able to set up my own rules within, of course, the law, but my own rules as far as pay, as far as hours for my employees, as far as like, I close every holiday that we have because I feel like we deserve to take a break. I don't open on Sundays, not because of religious, because I'm not a religious person, but but because where I am, it doesn't make sense. But on top of that, it's nice to have a day off because I'm here every day that we're open. So I felt like if I wanted to like dance at the beat of my own drum, I had to keep pushing for this. So that's why that's what kept me going. And then it really started to take off quickly. So I think the passion started to permeate. So it was a thing that within 6 months of me started roasting, my brother started roasting, I had to quit my job. It was just taking that much time. And we had to get into a lease and we had to find a space and we had to buy a bigger roaster. It just really started happening. So it wasn't a thing that was 10 years in the happening. It was fairly quick. And that also was very big motivations when we started getting accounts and people wanted the coffee. And that really fueled me to keep going. It was like this, you just want to do it. It's like super exciting.
This is amazing, Juan, and we love the participation that we're seeing in the chat. And actually, one of the Michael is asking, where are you importing Colombians, your coffee? And the other question is, how do you get people to come to your coffee place, and what is it, the uniqueness basically about what you call it the brew?
So, first question is, how do I import the coffee, or where are you importing Colombian coffee? We decided at that time we were going to bring coffee from the farm. So we knew it was going to be Colombian coffee. We decided we wanted to do a full vertical integration of the business model. So we realized in 2009 that transparency was a big thing. People wanted to know the origin, and that's really quick to answer the question of what third wave coffee means. Third wave coffee is higher quality of coffee and transparency. So people want to know where the coffee is coming from, but not only origin. They don't want to know it's coming from Colombia. They want to know it's coming. If you go to buy a good bag of coffee, they'll usually name the farm, the name of the farm, or where is it coming from, the process, who picked it, if it's fair trade. There's all these transparency. And when this transparency started to show up, that's where we called third wave coffee. Second wave was the step up of coffee. So first wave was just coffee. When you bought back in the 60s, where you bought those giant tins of coffee, that it was just for effect, not for anything. There you go. I love it. First wave Folgers, second, exactly. So second wave is absolutely right. I love it. Second wave Starbucks, because it brought a better understanding of better coffee. It doesn't need to come on a tin. It's not ground. It is actually to credit Starbucks, they did elevate coffee. So that's the second wave. People starting wanting to know, to have better coffee. Now Folgers is not enough. I don't want to drink that stuff. I want Starbucks because it's better, and it is better than Folgers. But then we realized, Starbucks is still burnt. The model grew too quick. You can't, even if Starbucks wanted, and they do have a roast, what they call it, the reserve stores now. And that's them trying to catch up to what we're doing. But Starbucks, to be fair, they grew up too quick. You don't have a single, even country that can provide coffee enough for them to have the product. So that's when third wave comes in. Transparency, smaller crops, going to the farmer, picking up, like bringing into the US. So yeah, we decided at that point we were going to import. We did our first import was 10 bags of coffee from the farm, and we bought it by plane. And we lost so much money on that stuff. Oh my God, it was like insane what we did. It was 10 thing in a pallet, and we brought it on a commercial plane, just like we wanted to ship stuff in. It was like insane, but we had this determination of like, we want it to be a full vertical integration. We want people to know this is coming from our farm. So that was one of the questions. And then the other one, I'm sorry, I get distracted and I love to talk about this. So
there was another one. where it says, do you feel
Oh,
that
how do I create the
Albuquerque,
following?
yeah, is a welcoming city for the food beverage industry? If you feel that Albuquerque itself, it's welcoming this probably
So let
new
me
product.
go into how do I create a following? So I think we started going to and we were the first coffee company because I know the guy, I don't know if you guys have been to the Coffee and Chocolate Fest, but when we started BM, he started the Coffee and Chocolate Fest. And we did it at the convention center in one of the smallest rooms. And we didn't expect so many people to show up. And I think we had roasted for 100 bags of coffee. And within 3 hours, we were out of coffee. My brother had to go roast while I kept like taking orders, like pre-orders, and it was insane. And then Noelle, who's a great friend now, showed up, and she had a business card of a hotel that was going to start called Park Central Hotel. And they loved the story, and they wanted our coffee. So even though our business model, when I wrote the business plan, I wrote it for retail, it shifted really quick to wholesale, hotels, restaurants, that kind of stuff. And suddenly it was like, okay, now I need to pull out my para. So I was vested with the state. And some people were like, why would you do this? I was like, well, I need to buy machines. I need to buy a bigger roaster. I need to buy all this stuff because all this stuff is happening. And I think the more I stayed true to my story and was able to connect with people, the more I was able to create this following. And interesting enough, when we started looking at spaces, we didn't have a lot of money. And we ended up getting this small space on Minol. And it was so interesting that people that wanted better coffee, it actually worked to our favor that they found us. It was almost like, look, there's this tiny little space where I'm going and getting my coffee straight like from the family that grows the coffee, and they just have this tiny space, and it's not pretentious, and it's like they roast as they go. And it just, and that alone, it was like this under roots movement where people started founding us and people started talking about us. And VM exploded into like this amazing thing where we hit $1 million in sales in less than 4 years. And it's like such a proud thing that we did. And I feel like because we did it, instead of trying to do this amazing branding and throwing all this money at it, we tried to connect with people, and we did all the festivals. And it was my brother and I and my mom and my dad and my older brother after work, and my niece who was 12 at the time. And it was just all the family just trying to talk to people and tell our story. And that's where people started talking about it. And then the journal wanted to do a story, and then the news wanted to do the story. And it was very organic how it happened, but that's how we created our following. As far as Albuquerque being welcoming for beverages, the quick answer, and I'll say why, is no. And that breaks my heart. I feel what helped us at the beginning, which was, and I feel because it's Albuquerque, because it's New Mexico, tradition is very important, family is very important. And that was really a big thing for us. When we started going into, so we were one of the first in the nation was actually be able to can a nitro beverage, a nitro cold brew coffee. When we tried to impulse that in Albuquerque, it wasn't received very well. And I think it was at that moment where and maybe it was that, it was now received more as a brand, like a Starbucks kind of business, more of a money kind of thing. And that was harder. I don't know if that explains, but I find it that Albuquerque is a very interesting market in the way of the artisan, if there's a story, if there's a family, if there's, it's harder for a product like a packed beverage to be impulsed here. So we did move it to California. That was kind of our push, distributor in California, and that did much better than it did here.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Ches Montoya. It's a pleasure to see you guys, and I'm a big fan of your product, and thank you for being here. Well, a follow-up to the last question, but actually, if you had seen recent news to one of your local coffee peers here in town, the Grind, or Grinding Gears coffee shop has shut down. They announced that they're closing their doors permanently, and that they would be selling the facility and property as well. But, just kind of a follow-up to that, Albuquerque receiving the market, seeing that COVID is here, and, congrats to you guys getting through that, or as well as you have. How has it affected you, seeing that someone like that has shut their doors?
Thank you. And I actually love that question, because if you guys know me, or if you guys know The Brew, and many of you guys don't, but I hope you guys come and see me, because I love to talk, clearly. But one of the biggest thing for me is community. So a quick parenthesis, last year, my brother and I were not seeing eye to eye on the business model. It had grown, it really can grow where it's out of control, where the business is controlling you. And that's not what I wanted in my life. He wanted partners, more investments, more money, keep growing, which has nothing, there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I feel like not only it's not so much because of my grandfather and the fact that I know what he wanted and what the intent was of this, but it's also on me. I love to connect with people, and I love, and I know that was the business running, the big business running part of it was taking so much time away from me, that even with Judy, like I couldn't just sit and have a coffee with her, or with the people that I love seeing every day. So I decided it was time to sell. I sold the distribution, big part of it. And in part of it, I kept The Brew, and I was able to just come back to the community. And it breaks my heart when I read news about coffee shops closing. Because even if it's not their focus, coffee is such a social product. Because more than the addiction, or the fact that we love the flavor, or the fact that we need it for energy, somehow I relate with most people. They have a story about coffee, or they have a great meeting about coffee, or they have a memory when they were kids. Like I have a great memory of every morning. It was like this much coffee and this much milk and this much sugar, but they would just, that was my breakfast, and they would just give me this bread, and I would just dunk it in the thing. And it was, for me, there's like nothing that compares to that breakfast. And so it just connects in a different way. So to see what's happening with COVID, and how we've had to be shut down, and how we can't have our people in, and it's been especially hard for the service industry, like that we all know, but for coffee shops where we're so vibrant because of people coming in, because of meetings, because of business meetings, because of you bump into each other without knowing it. I mean, it's been especially hard. With that, when I sold VM, I bought a roaster, not because I wanted to follow the path of what I had done before, but because I wanted to keep the concept of affordable great coffee and the vertical integration and being able to roast for The Brew. Incredibly enough, that played to my advantage, because when we had to shut, then I was able to put a website together and start to sell online, and just use some of my background. I've done it before with VM. It's not what I wanted to do, distribution and bags of coffee, but somehow it's kept me afloat. And some of my friends that have offices, I've been doing some distribution. Again, it wasn't the plan, but we have to survive. And that's how we've made it happen. Unfortunately, not a lot of coffee shops are roasters, and they've been hit very hard. And that's very unfortunate.
So they're asking a question. Can you expand on the import of agriculture products into New Mexico?
Absolutely. So more than, and I'm gonna just expand on coffee specifically, because I don't know about other products. I know we all follow different guidelines. Coffee is not considered a live, I don't know how to put it. What's the right term? Like avocados, tomatoes, whatever they bring from Mexico or Colombia, flowers that are alive. Coffee goes through a drying process. So coffee is more flexible because the moisture content, first of all, it goes through a drying process. And well, let's back up. Coffee itself is a fruit. So I don't know if you guys knew that, but what we drink is the pit of the fruit. So it goes through such a process. And while we're drinking, in order for it to be imported, it has to be less than 10% water content. I'm sorry, between 10 and 12%. It needs to have moisture content. So the fact that there's not a lot of natural organisms that attack coffee, and it will attack the plant itself or the fruit, but not the pit. And once you dry it, it's even less. So it's a much easier process than bringing avocado. So I can't expand too far because it really isn't that hard, is basically what I'm trying to say. As far as New Mexico, we don't import to New Mexico, you import to a port. So the first one is the hardest because you do a lot of paperwork. Coffee, like I said, is very forgiving. You don't have to do a lot of testing. They don't have to do a lot of stuff. The first one they do hold, they make sure you have all your paperwork. We do import through Houston because it's the easiest port for us from Colombia. It comes from Buenaventura, so it makes sense. The first one was the hardest, and then after that is just really just going through someone at port in Colombia. Like that part, I can tell you, like as far as specifics on paperwork and stuff. At port, whenever you want to import anything, this is what I learned. Because I thought at the beginning, oh my God, I'm going to need to learn all kinds of stuff about importing, exporting. Well, there's people who do it at port, even here in Houston or in Colombia, in Buenaventura. And all you have to do is find that contact, and then they will guide you through the forms. As far as agricultural, it really wasn't that hard for coffee. Like it's a dried product, so it's considered a different species, if you may. First one, you learn a lot on the forums, and then after that, it's just you kind of contact these two persons, one in Buenaventura who gets it going for the export, and then one in Houston who gets it going for import, but they have all the paperwork. So it kind of shows up here 6 weeks later, about 6 weeks later. And then I contact my freight provider to pick up at port after they've released the coffee. And that I do have to do because it has to be transported only with coffee, because coffee, when it's dried, absorbs everything around it. So it can't be transported with anything that has any smell or odor because it will affect the coffee. So I hope that it kind of answers the question. I can't go too much in depth because I don't know a lot about agricultural products.
There's another question. How is climate change affecting the coffee farm?
It's awful. And that's something I'm part of the Specialty Coffee Association of America. Now they've changed it to the Specialty Coffee Association because it's grown to the entire world. And we get very discouraged and very worried about coffee because, like I said, coffee is very temperamental and it grows specific within temperatures. About 4 or 5 years ago, we had an awful drought in Colombia, and our farm only produced about 20% of what it normally does produce. And that is a huge worry because coffee consumption keeps growing, but the productions are not stable enough for what's happening. So this is where GMO comes in on board. And I know that's an awful word that people keep throwing out there. But I don't know how else coffee is going to survive, basically. It really is a big issue for coffee, climate change.
Can you, there was a question that was in the list a little bit. It was somewhat in the middle of all of this conversations about your concerns about not being able, what happens when you have so much growth or so little external shocks that you're not able to supply the coffee from Colombia, and how is the farm affected, and how do you think about that?
So this would have been and this was something we were considering when we were growing VM. So we had 3 companies basically is what it had happened. The main one was on our vertical integration model. The idea when we started building these companies under the main company, which was VM Villa Miriam, but we then switched just to VM Coffee, was to have also an umbrella. So everything would feed VM in a vertical way. So coffee would be bought from the brew from VM. That would feed VM, and then VM would do the import and the roasting part. And then we created VM Liquid, which was all of the innovative products, which would, by the way, this is still not in paper, but there's a 4th wave movement happening, which is now more of exploration of what can we do with coffee. So nitro would kind of fit into that category. These canned, keeping the quality, keeping the transparency, but now we're transforming coffee is basically what it is. But then, so we built VM Liquid, and that was all the canned products, all the canning lines, all the, Whole Foods stuff, anything that was kind of already brewed kind of thing. So the answer to that was, part of the lucky part of, or part of the best part of my job is I get to travel twice to Colombia for harvest. So we have 2 harvests a year, one in April and one in right September. It's happening right about now, September, October. So I would travel before harvest to pick what we were going to bring for VM. So our coffee has about 1 million, our farm has about 1 million trees of coffee, and it produces a lot of coffee. Out of that, we were using about 10%, actually closer to 20% of the farm production. When I would travel, or my brother would travel, we would pick, there's all these gadgets to measure sun, water, you know, because it's everything grows in hills, but each hill can produce a different crop as far as quality of coffee. Even though it's going to be very similar, you can pick like the top of the crop. And that's what we would do. So it wasn't quite an issue, but we thought if this were to explode, what would we do? What we decided to do is we started building relationships with the farmers next to our farm, basically is what it is. So we started building a relationship with the families that own these farms, so that if we had to go into overcapacity, we could then start buying from them. Basically, that was the thinking behind it. As I pulled back and I kind of scaled down, then it's not an issue for me anymore, because I don't even use, at the brew, I don't think we use 2% of the production. And my idea, even though it is to open a couple more brews, I don't know with COVID if that's realistic anymore. I'm thinking more coffee trucks at this point, but all of these are ideas. It might grow, but I doubt that I'll be using a lot more than that, because it's not my idea to grow it. It's not my idea to follow the path of what I did with VM.
Juan, there was also another question. I think Ashley was asking it about Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks. And then do you feel that there's a critical mass of people who now understand the third wave in Albuquerque, like the coffee experience? And do you think that's going to be resilient? I'm kind of paraphrasing what Ashley said, but I wanted to get back to that question.
Absolutely. And you can see it. So Starbucks, I don't know if you guys have been to Seattle, but they started their reserve stores. And their reserve stores only cater to third wave. They do not sell their beans that you buy here. They do small farms. Actually, I had some of the best, not some, one of the best coffees I've had in my life. I had it in one of my trips to Seattle, going to this reserve, which, by the way, you can tell how much money they have, because this is like going to the Willy Wonka chocolate factory. Everything is beautiful. They have these tubes, almost like when you go to drive-thrus for the banks, where the coffee just like shows up as you order it. I mean, it's pretty incredible. And I had a Brazilian, a natural process Brazilian, that was $80 a pound. And that was pretty amazing. But anyway, I'm sidetracking here. That goes to show Starbucks is realizing, and same Dunkin', I'll talk about Dunkin' Donuts, but Starbucks is realizing that they need to shift. They need to. People are realizing their coffee. What I keep saying is it's a great milkshake. It's a great sugary drink, if that's what you want. But if you were to go and just order a latte with no flavor, and of course, this is generalizing because not everyone is the same. And some people like that burnt flavor. But for me, it's like awful. Like, why would you drink that? First of all, what people don't realize is in order for you to equalize flavors, because their mass is so high. If you do a tour of Starbucks roasting facilities, you have to do it on a belt, because it's so big you can't walk it in the time they give you. They roast so much coffee in order to level or neutralize the flavors or make it even. They have to over roast. When you over roast, you're creating these charcoal particles that you can actually taste. But there's studies that suggest that it actually is not good for your stomach. Like, you're drinking charcoal. And this is my opinion, but there's some studies that like it's not good for you. So I don't drink it, but whoever does, like, I'm not judging. But you see they're shifting and they're investing a lot of money. And I think they just opened one in Chicago as well, a reserve, you know, and they were shooting for San Francisco. So you're going to see their model shift as well. With Dunkin' Donuts, they're trying to do more of a origin. They're also, I don't know if you've seen the commercial lately, oat milk. Well, that's something that is completely out of third wave. And they're incorporating into this because they're realizing they're losing customers to us. So that's the quick answer. What does a cup of Starbucks Reserve cost? So when you go to Starbucks Reserve, you're basically going to something like VM or The Brew. where we go, our model has always been based a lot on our coffee, but like I right now, if I can find great coffee, I'll bid on it. And if I can bid a good price for it, I'll get it. Right now, like I have a Papua New Guinea is organic, great flavors. Like you get this pineapple front, this beautiful coffee. What I'm saying is I only have 2 or 3. I have an Ethiopian, a natural, I have the Colombian, and then I have that. But I don't want to expand much more than that, nor do I have the resources to start spending on all kinds of coffee. When you go to Reserve, you will find, like Willy Wonka on the Chocolate Factory, you will find the best coffees in the world. You will have all kinds of origins, all kinds of processes, all kinds of brewing methods. It really is pretty amazing. If you guys go, I do recommend going because it's mind-blowing. And it's very expensive. So the question is about grades of coffee. So there's 2 varietals of coffee. So let's go all the way to the top. There's Robusta and there's Arabica. So Robusta is mostly grown in, or it was mostly grown in lower elevations, and it grows much quicker with a bean that is much bigger. So the yield of coffee is much higher. There's a myth, and I'm gonna go to that in a sec, that Robusta is lower quality. And that is because Robusta was used for Folgers, all these canned, they use Robusta because you get a higher yield, it grows quicker, so you get a better price. Arabica needs to be higher elevation because it doesn't tolerate temperature as well, higher temperatures. Yields a smaller bean and it doesn't produce as much. So you don't see as much fruit on the trees as you do with Robusta. And Arabica is actually, it needs a soil that is a much richer soil. So basically I would used to say the Robusta is like the weeds of coffee, it just grows. Arabica, you have to give it a lot of fertilizer, a lot of fruit, a lot of compost to get a good crop. So a lot more labor intensive, a lot more cost intensive comes from Arabica. From the Arabica plant, you have like your bourbons, you have the caturras. So these are different variations. And that comes from way back when. Coffee comes from Ethiopia, basically Africa, but they've been able to pinpoint to Ethiopia. And we actually, there's thousands of varieties that we haven't explored yet that we're learning about. But basically what happened way back when is Queen of France, and I'm trying to think which one, decided that they wanted coffee and they started growing coffee in France. And that's basically bourbon kind of took shape. Of course, this would be greenhouse coffee. And then from there, you know, as they start selling here, they start bringing it here. And it was pretty amazing, the expansion of coffee. And they start creating different variations, even though they're very similar. For the normal palate, it'll be hard to start to find, unless you're talking very different coffees. But that's kind of the story on coffee. Grades, what happened then is, as we start studying coffee, you start creating the study of coffee. And this created a thing called Q graders. And these Q graders, all they do is you send your coffee, you get them to taste it, and they grade the coffee. And it's not an ABC 1, 2, 3. It's a 1 through 100 grade. Not 1. I don't think any coffee. I don't know. But yeah, it is a 1 through 100 grade. And then they would give it a score, basically. And then then from that point, they created the Specialty Coffee Association, and specialty is the highest grade of coffee you can get. And the specialty coffee then would only accept coffees that are 83 points or above. So it has to be cupped by a Q grader and given a score high enough to be a pretty good coffee. And then once you present these certificates, the Specialty Coffee Association would then accept you and certify you as specialty coffee. You could use their logo basically on your bags. And then that's like in a nutshell what it is for the grading. 12 per cup on the high end. There you go. That's absolutely true. So someone commented about the $12 per cup. So if you go to the reserve stores, you're going to spend a pretty penny. Everything is, and they got it down. Everyone wears their leather aprons, and everyone's like on point, and they have this gold star. And it's like I said, it's like you're in a, you could see the money that coffee brings. It's pretty, at some point, coffee was the second most traded commodity in the world. And when I did my business plan, coffee is one of the few industries that even through wars or recessions, people will still find money to buy coffee. So in terms of coffee cultural here in Colombia, oh, I love that you spelled Colombia with an O, thank you. How is it different? And is the coffee price per cup more expensive here versus Colombia? So that's a great question. Unfortunately, we produce, and I'm gonna be completely biased here, but we produce the best coffee in the world. Unfortunately, all of it is exported. That's the story. So we don't drink good coffee in Colombia. There's a new movement, I'm gonna say in the last 4 years, every time I go, you're starting to see, and even on commercials, like you wanna learn about coffee. And it is getting better. And it is unfortunate because if you guys have ever been able to go to a farm, coffee will never taste the same. When you pick it, you dry it, and you brew it, it will never taste the same. Even buyers, if you go to the farm, you pick the beans, you depulp it, roast it, because of the moisture content being so high, you get a completely different cup. It's actually some of the most amazing, it doesn't even taste like coffee. It's just like incredible. It does taste like coffee, but I'm just being a little dramatic. But it is the most incredible stuff. And some of the stuff when buyers started going to this was way when, you know, we started doing this third wave, buyers going to farms and buying coffee, they would taste coffee. And when they get it here, they would say it's not the same coffee. Well, coffee loses so much flavors and so many volatiles. They're called volatiles, all these flavors and all these aromas. When you dry it and when you ship it and when you allow time to pass. So it is unfortunate that we don't have a better culture in Colombia, because we could be drinking really, truly some amazing, exceptional coffee in Colombia, even though it's coming. So
when we were in Greece, we visited a company called TAF Coffee. And they had the practice of anybody who was going to be in any one of the TAF stores that they had, and they had, I think, 12 locations across the planet, including, I mean, New York, Auckland, New Zealand, there was quite a few places. But their business model relied on actually flying people who wanted to be employees in those places to them so they could train them domestically. Now, I know that's not the same as what you would do here, but I guess my question is, how much do you think about investment in your employees as part of the value proposition of how you develop the product?
I actually love that. I love that. So I take a lot of pride of my employees. I don't have a lot of turnover. I really don't. When they leave, it's because they graduated and they're now going into their actual profession. But they're almost like part, and of course not everyone, but for the most part, and they're part of the family, they're part of the brew. I think the reason is, first of all, for me, education is huge. So I don't want you to just come and brew coffee. I want you to know why our coffee is special, why the farm is special, why 65% of our pickers are women, 65% of the women, all of our pickers get paid living wages in the farm, why the farm is sustainable, why we have built trout lakes in the farm so that we can, and we have pigs in the farm so that we can, the pigs can eat the pulp of the bean, and then the pulp of the waste of the pigs can be left for the trout, and then the trout can feed the communities. It is very important for me to people to feel connected to what we're doing, and there's more than just a product. Like people just think, oh, I'm drinking a great cup of coffee, but there's so many people that have touched that product for you to be able to enjoy a cup of coffee. And unfortunately, many of our countries, these are people that are taken advantage of. So I feel like when there's a reason behind it and there's a social reason behind it, and of course my employees here make living wages. I've never paid minimum wage. So my employees with tips are making good money because it's important for me that they're taken care of. I've never been of the mentality of I want to make all this money and just hoard it and just like be this. It's not who I am and it's not what I want to do. So I feel like that's been such a key to my success. And I'm so thankful that you asked, because I can't believe I forgot. Like that is pretty much the whole reason why I wanted to start it, because I wanted to impact change. Like I wanted to do something that, even if it's with my 6 employees or, you know, when I had 30 with the other company, but where I could make a little change. Like I just feel like that's all we can do is within our circles, just create a little bit of change. That's what we're missing, I think.
Dr. Montoya, if I may really quick, I know that we're running out of time, but I think I would like to mention something. And, you know, he's talking, of course, about the little changes that he wants to make, but actually he has done a remarkable career with coffee and traveling around the world. And with the topic about being international, he's really humble. And I mean, he's a great friend of mine, but I always tell him that he has to market a little bit more about himself, because I'm sorry, but I gotta say it. So he traveled the world with Tom Cruise. He was going back to be Tom Cruise's personal barista. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So to say that we have a amazing person here making the coffee for Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it was something I was going to ask about, because I had heard about that. And I think one of the things that makes the brew such a wonderful example is that you're focused so much on the intangible aspects of coffee production, and you stretch out the value of those processes in such a way that that really lets us understand why global connectivity and supply chain and value chain are connected with each other. And just I actually want to use this that as a closing point, because we are at time, but I do want to kind of encourage everybody. Juan's example is the example I'm going to use in our next class on October 2nd. I'm going to show you guys how to do a value chain analysis and how that is an international value chain analysis. And we're going to use the brew as an example. And I promise, Juan, I don't want to take advantage of that. I actually want to use that as a way of kind of reporting back to you. So we're going to kind of put our ideas together. And then I'm hoping one day in the near future, I can sit with you one-to-one, and we can actually have a conversation, maybe with the Global Ties and others who are willing to show up. But just have a small conversation with you about this kind of value chain analysis in a informal and social way. But you do embody so much of the things that we're going to be talking about in terms of international competitive advantage, because what you represent is the way of telling the story behind your stuff. And in telling the story behind your stuff the way that you do, you actually plug directly into the logic of some of the most resilient aspects of the global economy. So you have my deepest respect, and you also have my gratitude for taking time with the students to have this discussion.
I really appreciate it, and I really don't. This Tom Cruise thing. I don't like to talk about it. But I in this context, I can tell you I've been in 6 continents, over 40 countries, over 400 cities, and I see the power of international. Like I know it. Like I've been there. So I if anything, I'm just glad that you guys are studying and you see it too, because I feel like instead of looking inside and trying to create borders and walls and shut everything down, is like we need to keep open. Like it is so important. I've seen it. Like so yeah, that's one reason why this Tom Cruise thing would be beneficial to this. Not that I'd like to talk about it. But I appreciate it. I really do. Thank you.
Yeah, Juan, you have our thanks, and we'll keep in touch. I know that this is part 2 of 4 parts in the recording. But if you're still popping in, you're more than welcome to sit in and participate in the other discussions moving forward. Please give Juan your reactions via chat or via the reaction button, or however you wish to do so. But thank you very much. And if
you guys are in the area, come and have coffee with me. We'll use max. It's only 25%, but I'm usually here. So
nice. Thank you. So it is now 3:05. We're actually going to continue at 3:30. So this gives us a little bit of a substantial break to clear our heads, go for a little walk or something like that. And then we're going to come back with Randy Trask and the New Mexico Trade Alliance, and then Karen Converse with Los Poblanos. But thank you, Juan. Thank you, Global Ties. Be back at 3:30.